My name is Ralf Wall. I am a plein air landscape artist by trade. I typically paint everything outdoors, landscapes from near North Ontario and even across the world. I've traveled to Kenya, led art safaris out there. I just love nature, so I do everything in watercolor, pen and ink, and acrylic with palette knife. As my three main mediums, you get a lot of different interpretations. Why do I create art? I like storytelling, and sometimes it's a story that you don't even know is there, right? There's always a mystery because of the subject matter that I paint. I tend to paint more wilderness that people aren't able to get to as easily, not really accessible. I go off the beaten path. I try and find places that you can't see from the side of the road or from just by walking around. Like, you have to search for it. So there's a story there. One, like, what's the story of me, the artist, going there? Why did I choose that? What drew me to that particular scene? What's around the bend? What's deeper into the woods? What's across the lake? All these little stories that just pop in. And sometimes I'll hear a viewer's interpretation and they'll say something, oh, I really want to know what's around those trees that you painted there. And at the time, I didn't really give it much thought because my story was elsewhere in the painting, but they found a new story inside this. For me, that's what it's all about. So how I go about creating a painting, there's two distinct ways to do it. So if I'm outdoors or if I'm in the studio. So if I'm outdoors, I will wander. Sometimes I know ahead of time where I want to paint or what it is I want to do, but most of the time it's just I know the general area, or let's go explore. Let's go find out what's around the bend, what's over the hill, what's through the bush, or what's on the other side of the lake that I keep staring at, but I never know what's over there. So I'll go hiking. And I'll just go until something catches my eye. And it can be for arbitrary reasons sometimes, like, oh, I just like the texture of that one tree, or the sun just comes out and lights up like a copse of birch trees, and it's like glowing white, and it's absolutely gorgeous and magnificent. And then I gotta work hard and paint fast. So you usually have a backpack with me at all times. It's pre-packed so that I just have to grab it whenever I wanna go out painting. I have a travel easel. I can set everything up within pretty much 60 seconds. I'm good to go. And then I work very instinctually and very quickly because I don't want to think too much. I want to feel, because my work is somewhat impressionistic. Even if it is very representational of what I'm seeing, I want the emotion of being there, not so much of this is visually what I see. So this is what it feels like for me to be standing here at this point in time and showing you what it is I'm looking at, but portraying the atmosphere, maybe the textures and the colors that I'm seeing, and evoking something out of you. If I'm in the studio, it's slightly different in that it's just not immediate. There's no sense of rush, right? So I can experiment more, I can play. I tend to do the larger pieces, very much like Homer. Homer did a lot of smaller pieces outdoors and then did the big giant pieces indoors. So when I'm in my studio, I can work on big, like 4, 5, 6 foot wide canvases, and I can take my time, play with texture. And those ones I tend to do more with the acrylic and the palette knife, and I get a lot more experimental and more expressionist with my painting. Even now talking, like I'm actually painting with my palette knife, and I use my whole arm when I'm painting, right? You want a lot of this just going into your work, and that's how I do it. And I like to play with color a lot. I tend to mix most of my color on the canvas as opposed to pre-mixing it, and I like to have not overly mixed colors on anywhere, because I want the interplay kind of almost impressionistic, where you have certain colors mixed like side by side, and they will create the illusion of color. And it's pretty much accidental, very Bob Ross, happy little accidents all the time. Just go with it, and again, don't think too much. Feel. I like to feel the work as opposed to, oh, well, I think I should do this and I think I should do that. I almost never think. I turn the brain off. The only time I use photographs is if it's a commission piece and it's a place I can't get to, right? Like I did a commission for someone where they grew up in PEI, had all these red cliffs against the ocean and stuff. So, well, I couldn't get there, so I used a photograph from that. But I find I can't sense everything that's there from a photograph. So case in point, I did another commission, and luckily it was only 3 hours away, and I decided I'm gonna go over there. And I'm so glad that I did, because it was a lovely picture that they took up on Lake Huron, and you could see the lake, and it had some nice trees and stuff. But off to the side that wasn't in the picture was this big, massive tree trunk that had been cut down. And you could tell this, and it was freshly cut. And the reason for the commission was they were selling the family cottage and they just wanted a memory of it. But that tree had to have held a lot of memories. They probably had swing ropes and all sorts of, they climbed it as kids because it was been in the family for a long time. So I actually took that stump and I moved it into the frame of the picture because artists, we could do that. And when I presented it, the grandma cried because she had so many memories, and had I not gone up there, I would not have seen that off to the side. There are two things, one for me and one for other people. So for myself, I like that it takes a voice of its own. Like 90% of the time, I go for a painting and think, oh, I see this, I feel this, I'm going to paint this. It's never what's in my head. It comes out differently, and it's not wrong, and it's not bad. It just comes out different than what I was anticipating it looking like, because I'm using more emotion and I'm just going with the flow. And if I make any mistakes, I just go with it. And it's, oh, okay, well, it wants to do this. What does the canvas want to do? So I will just run with it. And then sometimes it'll come out like totally opposite of what I was intending, but man, does this look good. And then on the flip side, when I see a person just staring at it and can't move away, and then they just lean in closer, and then they're trapped in there. So when someone can see my work, this is consistent with, as the years have gone by, whenever I do a show, I get more and more people just like, I just love coming in and seeing your stuff at the studio and whatnot. That's one thing I miss, is having my own studio again, so I could have that regular interaction. Seeing someone lose themselves in a painting that I have done, that's like one of the best things. And I see that more and more, which tells me I'm doing the right thing. I think I'm very fortunate that I have 3 very distinctly different mediums. So that always keeps everything interesting. If I see a scene, like I can come back here, like even at Homer Watson grounds here, and paint the same scene. But if I do it in ink, if I do it in watercolor, if I do it in an abstract palette knife, they're 3 very different things. So it always keeps it fresh, even if I'm doing the same scene. But sometimes you just get not tired or bored, but I need a break. So for a while there, I was doing birch trees like crazy. And everyone loved them. They were great. I would sell them. It's hard to keep them on my walls, which is great. But eventually, I didn't want to be stuck as the birch tree guy. And obviously, I love them. I have them tattooed on my arms. Like, they're my favorite tree. They bring a lot of light and texture, and I have a strong affinity to them. But for a full year, I didn't do a single birch tree. For a full year, I did everything else but. And then I came back and I started bringing them in again, and it was fresh and it was new. Right. So sometimes just taking a break from something, and then I'll go through phases. Like I'll go through, there are 3 months of I'm doing almost all palette knife work. And then I'll go, you know what? Let's flip around. Let's like Inktober. I'm going to do all pen and ink stuff. Right. And I go back to my more illustrative style and bring that back. So it's just switching it up all the time, keeping it fresh. And if you just need a break from something, take a break and focus on something else. Try something new. But I am very fortunate that I have very distinct mediums and styles. So. Well, first and foremost, my watercolor teacher in college. So when I was in college, it was one of those, you're going to learn 2-3 months of every different kind of medium, right? It was at Niagara College, which was a great experience, to learn a lot of stuff that you wouldn't normally do. Being a teenage boy, living in Niagara region, there was all this flowers and bowls of fruit watercolors. It was rampant throughout the late 80s, right? Everyone was doing this, and it was like, I don't want to do that. I want to do comic books, and I want to do action, and I want to do like Conan the Barbarian, but in watercolor and that kind of stuff. So I had this old Dutch World War II veteran as a teacher. And the very first day, he told us his story, his life story about being in a concentration camp, how he survived, the things that he saw. And then he said, okay, for your first assignment, I want you to go paint something I just told you. And it really struck home that I could tell actual stories and not do still life with watercolor. Because up until the point, I hadn't seen any really cool watercolors, because teenage boy comic books. So I thought, okay, cool. So I did this painting of a dead body in the snow and a line of prisoners going off into the cabin with barbed wire and all this kind of stuff. And I still have this painting, and it tells a story that I'm just like, wow, this is really, really cool. And then I said, okay, well, this is what I want to do. Like, can I do this instead? So I was doing like, barbarians and giants and dragons and all this kind of stuff. He goes, this is great, but your backgrounds they're getting lost. You're concentrating too much on your action. Go outdoors, go look at actual nature and bring it to life. Go look at your stormy skies. Go look at your waves and whatnot and make it more realistic. So he's the one who actually got me plein air painting. So that was the big kickstart. And then throughout, I was pretty much self-taught after that, but I would take little courses here and there with artists that I would meet. So instructor here, Scott McNichol, I met him when I looked at the Conestoga College night classes and stuff. And I thought, oh, we'll take art. Oh, it's at Homer Watson Gallery. Cool. I haven't been there since forever. So that's how I met Scott. And he was also a plein air painter as well. So we would go on trips together. We went to Algonquin with a couple other artists and did paintings there. So it was those paintings that ended up here in the gallery in 2012 because I was working with him and he was my teacher. So he had a big influence on how I saw the world. Even now, like as a professional artist, I like to take little classes with other artists. So Amy Ferrari has taught me all about color. She's an amazing teacher of color theory. Her work is just breathtaking to see and very vibrant. Nick Heron taught me all about texture. And then James and I did a workshop with them and then just taught me all about light and dark and getting that drama out of your painting. So those are the big ones that have really pushed me. I'll also include Nancy Peng in there. She taught me how to get loose with my watercolor and really let go and be free. So those are all the big influences for me. When I first became a full-time artist, I was teaching a little bit, but I was just, kind of winging it, playing by ear. I started following a couple big-time, world-class watercolor artists, Alvaro Castanet, Joseph Sputnich, and Herman Peckel, also known as the Three Amigos of watercolor. And I started watching how they go. They travel all around the world, and they give all these little workshops. They're very charismatic, but they demonstrate. They show you everything. They don't just tell. So they paint, they talk. This is why I'm doing it. This is how I'm doing it. They show how to hold the brush. They show how to do every little thing. They show everything, and that's what I like to do. So I will demonstrate a small part of it, and then I will let the students go, and then when they have caught up, I will show the next part. So they're always watching, but I will also go around to each person and make sure, okay, I notice you're holding the brush a certain way. If you try holding it slightly different angle, you're going to get a different result. Try it that way. Be very attentive to each person and watching what they're doing, and then just seeing how they go. But also allowing them to speak their own voice. I don't do paint nights where everyone paints the same thing. I want you to paint your story. I don't want you to just copy mine. And you shouldn't anyway, because you're a different person, right? You have a different voice, different experiences. You're coming from a different place than where I am. I've been painting a lot longer than the students typically. Sometimes I'll go to another artist thing, and I've had other artists come to me, but generally most students that come to me are beginner level or maybe intermediate. So I encourage them, don't compare yourself to me, because if you were as good as I was, you'd be teaching, right? So allow yourself to play, make mistakes. I'm a very big advocate on letting the student make a mistake and then showing them how to fix it, or at least turn it into something cool. Because the worst thing you can hear as a teacher is, oh, I tried this at home, but then I made a mistake, so I quit and I stopped. That's sad. No, I want you to push through, keep going. I want you to come in. I tried this at home, it didn't work out, but look what happened to it. It looks really cool. Or even if it didn't, how can I fix this? I can show you. You never want a student to get discouraged. So I'm always being positive. Encouragement is a big thing. And building a good rapport, joking around, getting to know them, engaging personalities, but reading them. If they're shy, don't push too much. Let them tell you how they want to be taught, because everyone likes to learn differently. So So I had this one lady, elderly, she hadn't painted since she was a child. Now she's retired. She came in, she wanted to do palette knife class. And I find most of the people that take my palette knife class, because it's a very free and loose style, come from a very tight, traditional style, and they want to get loose and free. But they're afraid to start. So I had this lady, and she had the paint on her knife in a blank canvas, and she's like, oh, I don't know. She was so afraid to put that first mark. And for 5 minutes, and it was a big class. So I was walking around, and finally I got to the end where she was, and I go, well, what seems to be wrong? I don't know where to start. So I said, can I offer you a suggestion? And she said, yes. And I just gently went, dunk, and just pushing her hand down so that she would make a mark. Start there. Because, oh, and then she panicked for a second. And I said, just go. And she went, and then I walked away. And then all of a sudden I just heard, oh, look what I'm doing. Look what I'm doing. It's so good. And she had this really cute, adorable accent. And when she was done, she was so excited. She took a photograph. She sent it to her husband, who was picking her up that night. But she had to send it to him now, before he got there, so that he could be excited to come see it. That's what I love. When someone's like so afraid, but then all of a sudden they discover what they can do, and they get, oh, I love this. It's so great. That was one of my favorite moments. I think the first one is paint for yourself. Don't paint for someone else. Even if it's a commission, right? If someone came to you to do work, they like your work, so paint your work. People can tell when you fake a painting or any kind of art, because your voice isn't coming out. I've done this before, where I've done all these paintings on plein air that are great, and I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to do a couple of these other paintings, but I did them in the studio, but I tried to make it look like it was plein air. It came out flat, and no one knew. But I had them on the wall, just randomly put in there, and people go, these are great, but these two here, they're okay. They just, they just seem like not you. For some reason, and I got that without telling anyone from several different people. They could always tell which ones I didn't do outdoors, right? So I stopped, and I thought, okay, just don't fake it. Be you. It's fun to copy other people, and you can copy everybody, but eventually when you make your own work, your voice will come out. So paint for yourself. You'll enjoy it much better. The other is, don't be afraid to play. Artists always forget to play, especially when you get into a more professional level where I have to show everything. Play and experiment. That's how I learned how to do, my palette knife came from finger painting with my niece. We were playing together, and she was making mud because she's mixing all the colors together. And I said, okay, well, let's just do 2 colors, and we'll do that. And she started playing. And then as we're going, she kind of created some marks and went, oh, it looks like a little mountain and some hills. And then she did, and I just started seeing things. And after she left and we cleaned up, I want to see if I can duplicate this, but using acrylic paint, and maybe not with my hands, but I'll use a spatula or something. So I went upstairs to the kitchen, I got a spatula, and I started smearing things around. I was like, this is really cool. And then I discovered I can get big palette knives. So that's what I use now. I use a big palette knife just from the experimentation of playing with my 6-year-old niece. Learn to have fun. Not everything has to hang on the wall, right? Not everything isn't going on the fridge or hanging in the museum. You don't even have to show it to anybody, but have fun.